every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you, Jesus, the name above every other name.
Good morning and welcome to Grace Online. Mike is away on vacation this week, so I'm going to be doing my best. He'll be back next week along with the other Albanos and their clan. They're just having some summertime up north. So let's jump right into some announcements. We have some exciting news. Rebecca and Josh Calder are having a baby shower Sunday, September 12th from 1 to 4 here at the church. So please talk to Kelly Culp or Sandy Calder for more details about that. If you're interested in being baptized on September 19th, we have a baptism. So if you'd like to be baptized, then please email info@igrace.ca or get in touch with Mike. And we have some other really exciting news. Paul and Catherine Clausen have had their son, Aubrey Lewis Clausen, born at the end of August. So we're really excited about that and their growing family. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start with a scripture. This is Matthew 18, 12 to 14. If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go look for the one that he wandered off? And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he's happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should be lost. So my name is Matt. I'm on the eldership team here. My wife is Lori, and we have 3 amazing kids, Hannah and Emily and Isaac. And I'm a teacher, so these times have been crazy as they've been for all of us, but in the pandemic, things have really changed for me. Right now, I'm teaching outdoor ed and wood shop and art and science as well, and some other things as well. And it's just so different than it has been throughout the rest of my career. So much of it has been online, and as you can imagine, especially teaching outdoor ed and wood shop, it's very, very challenging for it to be authentic and real, and students take those classes because they're looking for an adventure, they're looking for school to be a little bit different, and yet here we are plunked in front of screens. So I've tried to be creative with it. When I was teaching science, I wore a different hat every single day of the entire semester. We do things in outdoor ed like try and get outside and do photo scavenger hunts and workouts together online and watch videos and things, but it's just not the same as what we're normally getting into. With wood shop, I cut probably 500 pieces of wood for each student, bought every student a hammer and nails and measuring tapes, and sent it all home so that we could work as a class together, building projects on the computer at the same time, and all of the disinfecting and all of the protocols that are new at school. It has been really crazy, and I know that it's the same with everyone, that just our lives have been turned upside down with this last year and a half of trying to understand the best way to be safe and how to do normal life again, or maybe not. It's all just crazy times. So that's what I'm in the middle of right now. We're getting back to school. It's supposed to be a little bit more normal this year. We have masks and social distancing, but we're going to have field trips going again. So as an outdoor ed teacher, that's really important and great for me. Normally, and in a normal year, we go winter camping and sleep in Quincy's, and then we do canoe tripping. So we head to Algonquin Park and do a week-long trip and explore and learn about the benefits of being outside and the adventure of nature and all that kind of stuff. And some survival training is a big part of it as well. So we're going to do some survival training today. I hope that's okay with you. This might not be a typical preach, so get ready to learn. As many of you might know, our youth group has just returned back from Lake Superior, hiking the Superior Coast Trail, which is one of the most rugged and exciting and adventurous trails in all of Canada. And as I'm preaching right now, they're on their way home, so I haven't even heard about the adventures or how it went, but they're in one piece. They're safe and sound and on their way home here. And as my son Isaac was getting ready to head out, I had all of these thoughts of how I prepare students for outdoor adventures and for the risks and excitement of being out in the wilderness. And so one of the things that really popped into my mind was I want him to really know exactly what to do if he feels like he's lost. And as an outdoor educator, there's lots of really interesting and new study about what happens to a person when they're lost. And this hasn't really been an area of study for human behavior. And so it's kind of new and up and coming. There's new ideas. And it's pretty interesting to learn about what happens to you as you go through the steps of being lost. So we're actually going to learn about that today and look at it today. So have you ever been lost? So when I ask my students that, unless someone's had a really crazy adventure where they were very lost, most of them think, no, I can't think of a time when I've been lost. But surely every one of you have been lost. Even if you've been driving on the highway and you realize that you missed an exit, or you're in the mall and you don't know where you are. As I said, I'm dealing with high school students, so literally every single grade 9 has been lost as they're looking for their first classroom. Maybe you can relate to that scary feeling of thinking you knew which part of the school you're supposed to go into for a class and being lost. My school is just 2 big rectangles. So you'd think it would be hard to get lost, but there's a lot of bewildered faces on the first day of school wondering which way they should be heading. Often people can't think of a time that they've been lost, but some scientists say that probably everyone is a little bit disoriented all the time, unless they're in their house. So what I mean by that is, how many of you could point exactly which direction is north? Now, most of you are going to be in your house watching this, so maybe that's easy for you. But surely you've all had times in your life where you've suddenly realized, I don't know where I am, or I don't know how to get back to where I'm going. We went to BC this summer, me and the girls, and it was an amazing, fun time. But I spent most of the time using the GPS, especially when I was in the city. I actually do better in the forest than in the city. In the city, I'm like, I trust this GPS lady a lot because otherwise I'd have no idea how to get out of here. But I want to tell you about other times about being lost, because I've had to deal with it quite a few times taking students out into the wilderness. Let me tell you a story about when I was lost, and I think I maybe have shared this story before, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I love to fish, and quite a few years ago now, my best friend Fritz and I were heading into a secret lake in Algonquin Park to catch brook trout. It was a lake that there's no trails to, there's no canoe routes to, it's secretive and hard to get to, and it actually ends up being that you walk 4 kilometers on a trail, so there's no lake at all, and so there we are portaging our canoe and all of our stuff to be fishing down a trail, so we got some weird looks, 4 kilometers, then you go onto a little lake and paddle across the lake, and then you hike for almost 4 kilometers just bushwhacking. So you need to follow the lay of the land. There's a bit of a creek, but you can't just follow the creek because it doesn't lead exactly where you're headed. But that's kind of a marker or a checkpoint to make sure that you're on the right way. And the first time that Fritz and I went in there, I don't want to tell you too many details because I don't want you to know exactly where this secret lake is. But the first time we went in there, we got in no problem, and we had a great time. And so I'd even been into this lake before, which, as you'll find out as I keep talking, that can sometimes be dangerous. If you think you know where you are, you don't even know that you're lost. That can be even more dangerous than someone who's totally understands that they don't know where they are. So we walked the 4 kilometers, and we crossed this little lake. We popped out on the other side, and we knew we had about almost a 4 kilometer bushwhack through the forest where there's no trail. And the only one marker is this little creek, but you can't really follow the creek, as I said. And so I had the canoe on my head, so I couldn't really see what was in front of me. You kind of just sort of see what's in front, what's on the ground. And I had my pack on, and Fritz had the same. And we're trudging through the forest. And after about 45 minutes, we start to realize we should be now seeing some areas that we're familiar with. We should have seen the creek already, and we didn't. It should be starting to open up, and you can kind of get a bit of an idea of where the lake is because we would be on the height of land. And I took off the canoe, and I was in this meadow, which I'd never seen before. And I realized that we are lost. We have no idea where we are. We don't know how to get to the creek. And we started to have this really disoriented feeling of like, which direction should we go? And I was interested to learn about what happens to you when you're lost, because these steps actually happened to me. So the first thing that we did, the worst decision that we could make, we left all of our stuff in one place. So we decided, let's take all of our equipment, all of our food, our shelter, our canoes, let's leave it all on the ground here. Decision number one. Decision number two, let's split up. So I'm going to go that way, you go that way, and let's explore the area to see if we can find anything familiar. So that was our second worst decision. So then I'm by myself in this meadow. I head off in the one direction, and the strangest feeling came over me. I don't think I would describe it as panic. It was more like just the need to figure out where we were. And so I started to run full speed through the meadow. And then I get up into the forest. I'm running full speed as fast as I can through the forest, and I get it in my head. I need to climb the tallest tree that I can find so that I can see where I am and hopefully see the lake, maybe see where the creek is. So I've left all my equipment. I've left my friend. I've decided to start running, and now I have this brilliant plan that I should climb the tallest tree in the forest now that I'm by myself running through the forest. And it was in that moment, as I started to climb the tree, some little bells went off in the back of my head, and they're like, wait a second, I don't think this is the greatest plan. I don't think you should be climbing a tree by yourself in the middle of the forest. You don't know where you are. You now don't know where your friend is. You now don't really even know where your equipment is. And so in that moment, thank goodness, I climbed back down the tree. I walked back to the meadow. I called my buddy over, and I was like, wait a second. We need to just give our heads a shake. We have all of our equipment here. We can set up our tent right here. We can make a fire. We've got tons of food. We're safe if there's a rainstorm, if there's any kind of trouble. We have everything that we need. We also know that we're in a certain area on the map because you would have to cross a river or you would have to cross a lake to be outside of this area. So let's not be crazy and going off in different directions. Let's stay together and let's make a plan. So we found a little bit of a ripple of water coming out of the creek, just coming out of the meadow, just the smallest creek, littlest stream. And we realized if we follow the stream, it's going to lead us downhill to a lake somewhere. So even if it's not the lake that we're hoping for, we should be able to figure out on the map where we are if we follow the creek. And we followed the creek for less than 10 minutes. We had all of our equipment with us. We weren't running like crazy people. In less than 10 minutes, we followed the creek, and we could see the exact lake that we wanted to get to. It ended up being a great trip, lots of trout, and an amazing time. But as I said, I was really interested to find out that I had actually gone through these crazy stages of being lost. So there are now scientifically recognized stages of being lost. Let's look through some of them. The first step to being lost is that you deny that you're disoriented. So the first thing you think is this unbelief that you don't know where you are. Surely you know where you are. Surely you where you think you are. I have another story similar to that when I was teaching in Acton. We were in Algonquin again. We were down in the south part of the park, Kingscote Lake it's called, and we were collecting firewood. So if you've been down there, there's a camping area that has a road that's in a circle, and the camping area is kind of in that inside part of the circle, and then there's a lake on the outside part of the circle. And so we said to the students, everyone go collect some firewood for our fire tonight. You just need to stay inside the circle. So don't cross the road. If you don't cross the road, you'll be totally safe, totally fine. And a group of 4 girls went out to collect firewood like all of us did. And after about an hour, everyone kind of started coming back with their firewood, and people were fishing and playing games and hanging out. And after about an hour and a half, we started to realize these girls haven't come back yet. And it was starting to get dark, like evening time. And it's a pretty small area that we had sent them off into. So we searched the area, and they clearly were not there. There was no one there. So then we started to get a little concerned because they had to have crossed the road to be lost. So now there was not really any way of knowing exactly where they had headed. And I think the average walking speed is about 4.5 kilometers an hour. And so in that time, if they had crossed the road, they could be a very far distance from where we were, especially because we didn't know which direction they were walking in. It turns out what happened with these girls was they didn't actually cross the road. They were on the road because they knew that they would be safe on the road. But the problem is they started walking the wrong way on the road. So they thought they were walking back to camp, but they in fact were walking away from the camp. They walked for a good 45 minutes, an hour, and then they realized we should have been at the camp by now. So then they turned around and started to walk back, but then they walked for half an hour. And because it was only half an hour, they still didn't look familiar. Then they were second guessing their decision to turn around. So they turned around again and they started walking out again. And thank the Lord, we had a truck with us and we drove out actually to get some help, because we now were realizing that this could be a dangerous situation. And it was a good 5-6 kilometers down the road. There were these girls now walking in the dark with a bunch of firewood, pretty scared, obviously really disoriented. And it ended up being a happy ending to the story. But they didn't know where they were. They knew they were on the road, so they knew they at least weren't lost in the forest. But they just got turned around and were walking the wrong direction. They were walking away from camp instead of towards camp. The second step to being lost is panic. So when you finally admit to yourself that you're lost, you panic. And the problem with panicking, and when fear starts to get into your mind, then you start making really bad decisions. And I was interested to read that many people start to run at this stage of being lost, which is exactly what happened to me. Many people think they need to get to a height of land, and I'll talk about it later, but hardly anyone stops where they are, and hardly anyone tries to retrace their steps. Most people have the idea that they can find safety and they can find home and they can find where they're looking for if they just forge ahead. The third stage to being lost is to make a strategy. So finally you calm down, the panic starts to pass a little bit, and then you think to yourself, okay, I need a plan. I need some way to get out of this situation. So that's the third stage. Very similar to the stories that I've told already, but I have another one. I took a group of students mountain biking to a place called the Ganaraska Forest. It's got incredible mountain biking trails, and it was similar to the story with collecting firewood in Algonquin. There was a trail that was in a circle, and it wasn't some sort of trail that's hard to find. It's like a gravel trail where as we're mountain biking, there's like teachers with kindergarten classes walking them down this gravel trail talking about trees and wildlife. And we were mountain biking inside that circular trail. And so I felt comfortable saying to the students, okay, you can go on any of the mountain biking trails, just don't cross the gravel path. If you stay in this area, you'll be safe, you can have lots of fun, and we'll get back to camp no problem. Well, as I'm sure you can guess, wouldn't you know it, same thing happened as with our wood collectors. A couple hours pass, everyone's gone around their trails, mountain biking, and we get back to camp and we realize that there are 3 people missing. The group of 3 that was together, they are not there. And so I went with another teacher and I biked all the trails in this circular area. Now at least a couple hours have passed. And once again, we realized there's no way that they are on this trail system. They had to have crossed the gravel path. And once again, after 2 hours have passed, mountain biking in any direction, we didn't even have any idea where to start looking for them. So I got all the students back to the camp. And I said, we're staying here with the other teacher. I took 2 students with me, and I just started to bike one of the perimeter trails of the entire forest. But the Ganaraska Forest is hundreds of square kilometers. It's one of the best places to mountain bike in Ontario, so there's trails all over the place. We really had no idea where to start even looking. Oddly enough, there was, at the same time, the police were in the Ganaraska Forest, and they were doing a search and rescue activity, an exercise to help them with their search and rescue. So they were in the Ganaraska Forest. They had, I think it wasn't exactly a search and rescue. They were playing out a scenario where there was a bank robber, and the bank robber had fled into the forest, and they had to find this bank robber. So it was like this massive search and rescue scenario. But they were all carrying like machine guns and full camo, and they were all over the place. And so after enough time had passed and I was getting really concerned about these bikers, I went to the police headquarters that they had set up in a tent by where we were camping. And I said, we've lost these students. They were supposed to be biking in a certain area. Can you help out? And so the police said, well, we're not going to actually do a full-on search and rescue unless you're convinced that they're in danger. So it was still the middle of the day. Things were fine, but we just didn't know where they were. But what they said we can do is we can easily just radio all the police that are in the forest doing this exercise, looking for these bank robbers. And if we see the students biking by, then we can at least tell you where they are, at least send them back to safety. And so that's what happened. The police sent out a message to the entire forest, and wouldn't you know it, 15 kilometers from where I was standing, from where there's this trail that you're not supposed to cross, the gravel path, 15 kilometers down the trail, they found the 3 students biking for all they were worth. And when they finally got, the police drove them back to us, thankfully. And when they finally got back to me, I said, "What did you do?" And they said, "Well, we crossed the gravel path." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And the one student said to me, "We knew we were lost, but we knew we just had to keep going." And I'm like, have I taught you nothing? That's the one thing that you're not supposed to do. And they were sure we just need to, they made a strategy. They got to step number 3 of being lost. We need a strategy. We just need to keep going. So that's stage 3 of being lost. Stage 4 and 5, things get worse. Stage 4, you start to deteriorate mentally and physically as your strategy fails. So eventually you start to get tired. You, I'm sure, are getting hungry. I'm sure are getting thirsty. One of the things we love to talk about in wilderness survival is what are the most important things for survival. And it's always kind of a trick thing where people often say they need water, most important, but usually shelter is the most important thing when you're in a survival situation. Yes, there's exceptions. You could be in a beautiful sunny day and in a climate that's not super harmful, and then maybe water is more important. But in general, shelter is the most important thing in a survival situation. And then you need water within a day for sure. And then lastly, you need food. So those are the most important things in survival situations. But when you're lost, all of those things become so much more important because of the mental state that you're in, the disorientation that you have, the deterioration of your mental state. And so it's really, really crazy what goes on through your mind. People who are lost start to be convinced that no one's looking for them. There's been stories where helicopters have gone right over the people that are lost, and the lost people were just convinced they weren't looking for them. There's been stories of people who are lost coming to a road and then crossing the road and going back into the forest because they're convinced that they know how to get back where they came from. There's been times where people are lost and they've even encountered other people and weren't believing what the people were saying. So someone says something like, "That's the trail back to the cottage." And they're so convinced in their lost, messed up mental state that they don't believe them and they continue on the wrong path. So stage 4, things are starting to fall apart. You start to do things like not even believe your compass. So there's stories of people breaking their compass with a rock because they were convinced that the needle wasn't going the right way. Not trusting your map, starting to think things like maybe the lake has dried up. So it's not actually there, even though they have a map in front of them. You can see that things are starting to really fall apart. And then the last stage, kind of a sad one, stage 5 of being lost, you finally just become resigned to your plight. And this is when you actually give up. And these stages can happen really quickly depending on the environment and depending on the people. And so there's really upsetting stories of people dying in 24 hours. In fact, of the people who die that are lost, half of them die in the first 24 hours. Let me say that again because that just seems so crazy to me. Of the people who die when they're lost, from being lost, half of them die in the first 24 hours. Isn't that crazy? And so the main reason is they're not thinking straight, they're not making good decisions, and eventually they are just resigned to their plight. They just completely give up. And those steps speed up when there's things like hypothermia. The truth is, there are times when all of us have been lost. So you might be wondering, why are we learning about being lost? Well, I don't know about you, but the last year and a half, the pandemic has brought upon us this feeling of uncertainty, this global disorientation. The path that we used to take now seems unfamiliar and you can't trust it. The entire environment around us has changed. The truth is that we have all been lost before, and that in these crazy times, each one of us can relate to this feeling of lost. And the weird and crazy thing is, you can actually take these physical characteristics of being lost and even the stages of being lost, and you can relate them to your spiritual life. Which stage of lost are you at right now? If you have any kind of feeling of loss of purpose right now, you're not sure what your priorities are right now, what is church supposed to look like? What are friendships supposed to look like? What is work supposed to look like? Should I be continuing to do the things that I was doing before, even though they're not working the same way? Maybe we're not even allowed to do them the same way. All of that is lost. And when someone is lost, they need a map, but things don't make sense anymore. The map that they knew was laid out, and you start to think things like, maybe this lake on the map is actually not here anymore, it's dried up. Everything seems to be shaken. Can you relate to this? Have you been taking stock now of your resources? Do you have food and shelter and water? Where does every single person who's lost want to be? And I think that the answer to that is home. They want to be home. If you're lost, you want to just get home. And whether you're a person who's lost and knows that they're lost, or maybe more dangerously, maybe you're a person who's lost and doesn't know you're lost, you're still blindly following the environment around you, but going the wrong way, you still are heading for home. And home isn't really a place, as we all know. Mike shared a really cool story, maybe a month ago, maybe it was longer ago, it doesn't matter, about when he was on a missions trip, and he was in a beautiful place with amazing and wonderful people, and he just had this longing to be with Rachel. And in a way, you could say that he just had this longing for home. And I have that exact same experience with my wife. I can remember when I was in high school, I was in Algonquin Park, my favorite place in the world, fishing and canoeing, doing my favorite things in the world. And I can remember for the first time in my life, I was probably 17, I wanted to go home. And that's when I knew I was in love with this girl, because I'd never wanted to leave the wilderness, and that was my home. And now that had switched, and my home was Lori. And home is where love is. And love has a name. Jesus is his name. So Jesus is home. Okay, before I move off all the lost stuff, I don't want you leaving this talk without having the skills for when you're actually lost in the wilderness. So let's just go through them quickly. What are you actually supposed to do if you're lost you're on a canoe trip, you're in the Superior Coastal Trail with the youth group? What are you supposed to do if you're lost? Okay, the first thing you're supposed to do is stop. Okay, as I said before, the best thing to do is just stay where you are. If you think that you can do it, you can retrace your steps. The worst thing to do is move forward. And it's important that you know that about yourself, because you will have the urge to just push on. So the first thing to do is stop. Okay, the second thing to do is to take stock of your resources, the things that you have. As I said before, make sure you have shelter and food and water. You want to sort of strategize safely for how to be okay. If you're able to make signals, then anything that's in 3, so 3 shotgun shots, 3 horn blasts, 3 whistles, anything 3 is a distress signal. And just another safe thing that you should always do when you're on wilderness adventures is tell people where you've gone. So what does that have to do with being lost and with the pandemic and with our spiritual well-being and where we're headed? Well, God is real, and he loves you. And he created you for this time right now. Listen to this. God knows that you would be here right now. He has a passion for you right now. He has a purpose for you right now. He has a plan for your life right now. So if you're listening and you have that nagging feeling that I've had as well, that you don't know what the next step is, you don't have a burning purpose that you feel has been put on your heart, maybe you don't even know God, you didn't even know that there was a God who has a purpose for this life. Jesus is home, and he has a purpose for you. He wants to call you home. He wants to bring purpose and well-being into your life like you've never felt before. He is the answer to the questions. He is the trustworthy one. He is our guide that never fails. Storms come and go, but his steadfast love never fails. And how do you find home? How do you get home if you recognize this lost feeling within yourself? How do you find passion? How do you find God's plan for your life? How do you know what your next step is going to be? Nothing is the same as it was before. If you're a young person and you're deciding what are you supposed to do after high school, or you've finished university and where are you supposed to look for a job, or if you've retired and you're wondering, is there still purpose? Is there still a place? Is there still a plan for me that's full of passion and full of God's purpose in my life? The answer is yes. So how do I get home? Well, the amazing thing, unlike being lost in the wilderness, even with search and rescue parties, is that there is a God who is pursuing you. He is coming after you like the lost sheep. He is longing for you to find home, which is him. And so all you need to do is just turn your heart to him. Say in your heart and your mind, am I lost, and where are you, God? Show me home. Let's think of the story of the prodigal son, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with the son who goes away, lost in his ways, making a plan that he thought was right for his life, and he realizes when it all comes crashing down, where does he want to go? What is his thought? He wants to head home. And all he needs to do is just turn and head that direction. And in the story of the prodigal son, the father who's been waiting for him to head home runs to him. It's the amazing grace and power and love of Jesus that to find home, you only need to turn to him. You don't need to retrace your steps. You don't need to make a new strategic plan. There's nothing that you can do when you're lost in the wilderness. He's after you. He's chasing after you. He wants you to find him. So let that sink in. There are vehicles to finding Jesus, prayer and praise. In these crazy pandemic times, maybe you haven't been involved in church. Maybe you've never considered going to church before. Prayer is just talking to God. When was the last time you just talked to God? When was the last time you said, Father, what is the plan and the purpose that you have for me in my life? And another vehicle is praise. And it might sometimes feel weird to some of us to be singing. It's not part of our everyday culture that we're singing, but to release your heart to sing and worship and praise, especially in corporate worship, but also by yourself. It just orients you to that Father that is running to bring you home. I just want to give one last parallel between being lost and in the wilderness and our spiritual walk and what God is taking us through right now. Because with these challenging times, there is also a huge opportunity for all of the things that are not important to fall away, all of the things that we thought we were pursuing, to judge and challenge those things and find that God is the faithful Father who has a plan for us. So let's embrace the craziness of these times because God has a plan and a purpose, and he has an ultimate home for us as well. So let's just trust in that. So back to the parallel, when I'm trained now for search and rescue as a wilderness first responder, and it's another interesting parallel of when someone is lost, the first place that we look for a lost person needs to be the most dangerous place. So if we're on a camping trip and we realize someone is missing, first place that we're going to go is to the water's edge, or if there's a ravine, we're going to go to the cliff edge. If there's fire, we're going to go to the fire. You go to the most dangerous place first if someone is lost, and I'm sure that you can see the connections between that and your spiritual life. The second place that you're going to go is the most likely place that a lost person would be. So if someone's lost and you're on a campgrounds, then you might want to go to the Kaibo, the Biffy, the Johnny on the Spot. They might be there. You might want to head to, if there's a really nice place for photographs, like the sun is setting, that's the most likely place they might be, so you want to head there if there's a great fishing spot or whatever. You get the idea. The last place is then you just start searching in ever-growing circles, being careful not to lose searchers because you don't want the situation to get worse. The hardest people to find who are lost are those who don't want to be found. So once again, I'm sure you can see the connection between the pursuit of Jesus. And the hardest people to come home are those that don't want to come home. If we just take another quick aside about just the science of people who are lost and found, it might be surprising to hear that the most likely person to be found who is lost, just take a second to guess. So let's think of some categories. We have experienced wilderness people. We have hunters and people who are camping and fishing all the time. They're out in the wilderness. We have elderly people. We have average Joes who haven't really been out in the wilderness too much, but they've gotten lost. Then we have kids. So kids are kind of in different categories when we look at the science of someone being found. There's a category from 12 to 15. Then there's a category of 12 to 6. And then you have below 6, so probably like 2 to 6 years old. So of those categories, by far, there is one group that usually gets found without any harm. Guess which group it is? You may be surprised to hear it's actually the group we're most concerned about. The group of people who are 6 and younger are the most likely to be found unharmed if they're lost. The science shows that it is not even close. And in fact, usually amongst the people who don't survive or have the hardest time being found are people who are experienced. So hunters, outdoors people, they actually can be the hardest to find because they think they know where they're going and they're making the situation worse. So why is it that children who are 6 and younger get found? They don't have a concept of their spatial environment. They don't have a mental map of where they are and where they should be. All that they do is just respond to their body's needs. So if they're cold, they cuddle up in a place that's warm. And if they're scared, they hide in a place they feel safe. And if they're thirsty, they look for water. They don't wander long distances. They just are lost in that one place. And so often, that group of people is the safest. Okay, that is an aside. Let's bring it home, people. Let's finish it up. I just want to give us a caution as we consider lost and our lives together. If you were in a wilderness situation and you were looking for someone who is lost, how would you treat them? So maybe some of you have been in that situation. I know that I have. I've found lost people before. It's such a relief. You're so happy to find them. But how would you treat someone who's lost? What about someone who doesn't know that they're lost and you find them? So they're trucking down the trail. They think they know exactly where they're headed, but you know they're lost and you need to find them. How do you treat someone like that? Be careful how you treat someone who's lost, whether they're entirely lost or lost in some sort of way. What does that have to do with anything? Well, let's think about lost in the spiritual sense, lost in purpose, lost in life. Be careful how you treat people around you. In these uncertain times, the church should be arising with profound grace, profound mercy, profound humility, most importantly, profound love. What is the church's reputation during the pandemic? How do you think people see the church and the pursuit of spiritual and the pursuit of God and the pursuit of purpose? People haven't stopped searching for hope and meaning in these times. Probably more people are looking for hope and meaning than ever before. God hasn't stopped drawing people to himself. Just be careful how you look and engage with lost people. Be careful what you're putting on social media. After all, we've all been lost. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Not because of my works. He just found me in the wilderness. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for everyone who's listening this morning to your word, and I pray that there would be a revelation of the Holy Spirit right now of your desire for home, that those of you who've never even thought about Jesus or thought about what the cross means or thought about what the purpose of life means, thought about the fact that God has a passion for your life and a purpose for your life. Even if you thought you knew what it was, he is home. And so I just ask in Jesus' name right now that hearts would be touched, that lives would be given to you, that in the quiet moment of a prayer, you would say to God, am I lost? Bring me home. Each one of us, whether you're a Christian or not, where am I lost? Where are you in these times of uncertainty, God? What is the purpose and plan for the church? How should we gather? What should our jobs look like? What should our families look like? Thank you, Father, for your love this morning. Amen. Have a great Sunday.